Princess Zarathul stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, her blue crystalline skin catching the light from 100 different suns. The hall was massive, built to hold representatives from dozens of alien species. Today, it held only the most important delegates from two civilizations that had been killing each other for 300 years. The Cathani Empire had been at war with the humans for longer than most people could remember. Her great-grandmother had started this fight over mining rights in the Spiral Arm. Now, her people were dying on a dozen worlds, and their beautiful crystal cities were turning to dust under human bombs. The old Cathani diplomat read from an ancient scroll. His voice echoed in the huge chamber. By the old laws of war and peace, we offer this solution. A marriage between the royal house of Cathani and the leadership of Earth. This union will bind our peoples in peace. Zarathul had known this day would come. She was the last princess of her line. Her brothers had died in the war. Her duty was clear, even if she hated it. She looked across the hall at the human delegation. They were so small compared to her people. Cathani warriors stood 8 feet tall, with skin like living crystal and strength that could bend steel. The humans looked soft and weak in their simple clothes. One human stepped forward. He was not the biggest or the strongest looking. He had dark hair and calm brown eyes. His uniform was plain, with just a few simple medals. Nothing about him looked special or dangerous. "I am Commander Marcus Chen of the Terran Coalition," he said. His voice was steady and clear. "I accept this arrangement for the good of both our peoples." Zarathul studied him carefully. She had expected someone who looked more important. Human leaders in the war reports always seemed bigger, louder, more threatening. This man looked like he could be a teacher or a clerk. She wondered if the humans were trying to insult her by sending someone so ordinary. "I am Princess Zarathul, heir to the Crystal Throne," she replied. "I accept this marriage to end the bloodshed." The ceremony that followed was simple. Both civilizations had agreed to keep their own traditions separate. There were no human priests or Cathani crystal singers. Just words spoken in front of witnesses, promising peace between their peoples. Marcus stepped close to place a simple gold ring on her finger. Cathani hands were longer than human hands, with an extra joint. But the ring fit perfectly. She noticed that his hands were steady and rough with old scars. These were not the soft hands of a diplomat. "I had this made specifically for you," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "The gold comes from Earth, but the design is from your home world. I studied Cathani art for months to get it right." Zarathul looked down at the ring in surprise. The pattern carved into the gold was indeed from her culture. It was not just any pattern, but one that meant strength in unity. Few humans would know such a thing. "You studied our culture?" she asked. "Of course," Marcus said. "If we are to be married, I should know something about your people beyond what the war reports say." The formal ceremony ended with documents signed in a dozen languages. News networks across the galaxy broadcast the event. The war was officially over. Soldiers would go home. The killing would stop. As the crowds filed out, Zarathul found herself alone with her new husband. She did not know what to say to him. On her world, arranged marriages happened, but usually between people of the same species who had at least met before. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked. "I know the formal dinner is not for another 3 hours, but I brought some food from my ship. I thought you might want to try human cooking." This was not what she had expected him to say. "You cook? I find it relaxing," he said with a small smile. "Cooking is like solving a puzzle. You have to understand how different ingredients work together to create something new." He led her to a small room attached to the council chambers. Inside was a simple table with several covered dishes. The smell was unlike anything she had experienced before. Cathani food was mostly grown in crystal gardens and tasted clean and light. This smelled rich and complex. Marcus uncovered the dishes one by one. "This is called stir-fry. Vegetables and protein cooked quickly in a hot pan. This is rice, a grain that grows on Earth. And this," he uncovered the last dish, "is something special. I tried to recreate a Cathani flour soup using earth ingredients. Zarathul stared at the last dish. It looked almost exactly like a traditional soup from her homeworld. The color was right, and the smell reminded her of her childhood. How did you? I spoke with some Cathani prisoners of war, Marcus explained. They were homesick. We talked about food, and one of them described this soup. It took me many tries to get it right with earth plants. She tasted the soup carefully. It was not exactly like home, but it was close enough to bring tears to her eyes. No one had ever made her Cathani food before. Even on her own world, she usually ate alone or at formal dinners. Why are you being kind to me? She asked. This marriage is just politics. You do not have to pretend to care. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He poured tea for both of them from a simple clay pot. My grandmother always said that just because something starts as duty does not mean it has to stay that way. We are going to spend our lives together. Why should we be miserable? They ate in comfortable silence. Zarathul found herself watching how Marcus moved. Everything he did seemed careful and planned, but not in a nervous way. More like someone who was used to being very aware of everything around him. What will happen now? She asked. Now we go to Haven's Rest, Marcus said. It is a neutral station between our territories. We will live there while the peace treaty details are worked out. It will be our home for the next few years at least. Our home, Zarathul repeated. The words felt strange in her mouth. Yes, Marcus said. Our home. I know this is not what either of us planned for our lives, but maybe we can make something good from it. As they prepared to leave for the transport ships, Zarathul realized that her new husband was nothing like what she had expected. She had been ready to marry a typical human. Loud, crude, and simple. Instead, she found someone who made her soup from memory and spoke about duty like it was a choice. She wondered what other surprises Marcus Chen might have for her. She had a feeling that ending a war might be the least complicated thing about their marriage. 6 months had passed since Zarathul and Marcus arrived at Haven's Rest Station. The place was built in the space between Cathani and human territories, where ships from both sides could dock safely. It was supposed to be temporary housing, while diplomats worked out the details of permanent peace. Zarathul had expected to live in separate quarters and see her husband only for official events. Instead, Marcus had suggested they share living space like a real married couple. We might as well get to know each other, he had said simply. Their quarters were larger than most on the station, but still small compared to the palace where Zarathul had grown up. Marcus had somehow made the space feel like home. He hung artwork from both their worlds on the walls. The furniture was arranged so they could eat together or sit and talk in the evenings. The strangest thing was the garden Marcus had built in their main room. He had convinced the station engineers to install special lights and air systems. Now vegetables and flowers from Earth grew next to crystal plants from her homeworld. According to everything Zarathul knew about biology, these plants should not be able to live in the same soil or air. But somehow Marcus had made it work. How did you learn so much about Cathani plants? She asked one morning, as she watched him carefully water a singing flower from her home planet. I read a lot, Marcus said. Your people wrote some very detailed books about farming. I also talked to the Cathani workers here on the station. They were happy to teach me. Quote, Zarathul had noticed that people liked talking to Marcus. Not just humans, but aliens from a dozen different species. The Cathani maintenance workers, who usually kept to themselves, would stop to chat with him about their families back home. The insectoid traders who delivered supplies would spend extra time in their quarters, clicking and buzzing in animated conversations. It was not just that Marcus was friendly. Zarathul had met plenty of friendly people. There was something else about him that she could not identify. When he spoke, people listened carefully, like his words carried extra weight. She started paying closer attention to how her husband moved through their daily life. Small things began to stand out. When the station's artificial gravity had hiccups, which happened every few weeks, everyone else would stumble or grab onto something for balance. Marcus never seemed to notice. He would keep walking normally, while others struggled to stay upright. His reflexes were unnaturally quick. She had seen him catch falling dishes before they hit the ground, turn towards sounds before she heard them, and step out of the way of maintenance workers before they called out warnings. At first she thought it was luck. After months of watching, she knew it was something else. Marcus cooked for them every evening. The meals were always perfect, combining flavors from both their cultures in ways that should not work, but somehow did. One night, as she watched him prepare dinner, Zarathul noticed how he handled the kitchen knives. His movements were too precise, too controlled. He cut vegetables with the exact same thickness every time, without measuring or seeming to think about it. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" she asked. "Practice," Marcus said, not looking up from his work. "But you move like someone who learned knife work for fighting, not cooking." Marcus paused for just a moment. His hands went very still. Then he continued chopping vegetables as if nothing had happened. Many human skills transfer between different activities. Good knife work is good knife work. That night, Zarathul lay awake thinking about her husband. The more time she spent with him, the more questions she had. Marcus spoke a dozen alien languages fluently. He knew the customs and history of species she had barely heard of. When station alerts went off, he always seemed to know what was happening before the announcements came over the speakers. During the day, Marcus worked with the diplomatic teams from both sides. Zarathul sometimes sat in on these meetings. She watched how the other humans interacted with her husband. They treated him with respect that went beyond his official rank. When Marcus suggested changes to trade agreements or cultural exchange programs, senior diplomats took notes like students. "Commander Chen makes excellent points," the chief human negotiator had said after one session. "We should implement his recommendations immediately." Zarathul had read Marcus's official file. According to his records, he was a mid-level military officer with experience in communications and logistics. Nothing in his background explained why veteran diplomats hung on his every word. She decided to ask him directly one evening after dinner. They were sitting in their garden area, watching the stars through the large viewport. "Marcus, what did you do during the war?" "Many things," he said carefully. "I served where I was needed." "That is not an answer." Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "I did what was necessary to protect my people, just like you would do anything to protect yours." "But what specifically did you do?" "Things I hope I never have to do again," Marcus said. He reached over and took her hand. His fingers were warm and gentle, but she could feel the calluses and old scars. "The war is over now. We can focus on building something better." Zarathul wanted to press for more details, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. She had seen that look once before, during the marriage ceremony. It was the look of someone who had seen terrible things and chosen to carry them quietly. A few days later, disturbing news arrived. Intelligence reports showed that extremist groups in both civilizations were working together. They rejected the peace treaty and wanted the war to continue. These groups had stolen military equipment and were planning attacks on civilian targets. Marcus read the reports in their quarters while Zarathul watched. As he turned each page, his expression grew more focused and cold. When he finished, he sat very still for several minutes. "How bad is it?" Zarathul asked. "Bad," Marcus said. "These groups have combined Cathani crystal weapons with human tactical knowledge. They know how both our militaries work. This makes them very dangerous." "What will the authorities do?" "They will try to stop them," Marcus said. "But this kind of enemy is hard to fight with regular armies. They hide among civilians and strike without warning." That night, Zarathul woke up to find Marcus standing at their viewport, looking out at the stars. His posture was different than she had ever seen before. He stood like a soldier, ready for battle, not like the gentleman who cooked her dinner every night. "Marcus, is everything all right?" He turned to her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Everything is fine. Go back to sleep." But Zarathul knew that everything was not fine. She had a feeling that whatever Marcus had done during the war, he might have to do again very soon. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly comforted. If dangerous people were planning to hurt innocent civilians, maybe it was good that her husband was not as gentle as he seemed. She went back to bed, but sleep did not come easily. Outside their quarters, Haven's rest station continued its quiet orbit, between two civilizations trying to learn how to live in peace. Inside their room, a princess and a soldier pretended that the war was really over. Zarathul was reading in their garden when all the lights on Haven's rest went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. Alarm sirens began wailing throughout the station. Marcus appeared in the doorway so quickly that she jumped. 1 second he had been in their bedroom. The next he was beside her, fully dressed in clothes she had never seen before. Dark pants and a shirt that seemed to absorb light. "Stay calm," Marcus said, his voice completely different from normal. Gone was the gentle tone she knew. This voice carried absolute authority. "We are under attack." Through their viewport, Zarathul could see ships appearing out of nowhere. Stealth technology that should not exist was failing, revealing a combined fleet of human and Cathani vessels. The ships looked wrong, painted in colors that hurt to look at, and bristling with weapons from both civilizations. "How many ships?" Marcus asked, though Zarathul had not said anything. "I count 12 large vessels and maybe 30 smaller ones," she said automatically. Marcus nodded and moved to their communications panel. His fingers flew over controls she did not know existed. Numbers and tactical displays appeared on screens around their quarters. "Marcus, how do you know about these systems?" "Emergency protocols," he said without looking up. "The station commander gave me access codes when we arrived." Ow, that was a lie, and they both knew it. Station commanders did not give tactical system access to diplomats. But before Zarathul could ask more questions, the first explosion shook the entire station. "They are targeting the defensive systems first," Marcus said, reading displays that updated faster than she could follow. "Smart. They want to disable our ability to fight back before they board." "Board? You mean they are coming inside the station?" "Yes." Marcus opened a wall panel she had not known existed and pulled out equipment that definitely did not belong to a diplomatic officer. Body armor that looked more advanced than anything she had seen during the war. Weapons that seemed to bend light around them. Communications gear that hummed with power. "Marcus, what is all of this?" "Insurance," he said, putting on the armor with practiced speed. "I hoped I would never need it. But I prepared for this possibility." Another explosion, closer this time. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, making Zarathul's stomach lurch. Marcus did not seem affected at all. "Listen carefully," Marcus said, checking his weapons with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "I am going to seal you in our bedroom. The walls there are reinforced. You will be safe until I return." "Return from where?" "I need to help defend the station." "Marcus, you are a diplomat, not a soldier." He stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. For a moment, his careful mask slipped, and she saw something that made her blood freeze. Her gentle husband's eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. "No," he said quietly. "I am definitely not just a diplomat." Before she could respond, Marcus was moving. He led her to their bedroom and activated controls hidden in the wall. Metal shutters slammed down over the windows. The door sealed with a hiss of pressurized air. "The room is now completely secure," Marcus said. "Nothing can get in or out except through controls I programmed. Do not open this door for anyone except me. Do not answer communications from anyone except me. Do not trust anything you see on the station's regular communication channels." "How will I know it is really you?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I will say the flowers are singing. That is our code. If someone comes to the door and does not say those exact words, do not let them in." "What about station security? What about the other diplomats?" "I will take care of them." Marcus moved toward the door, then stopped. He came back and kissed her forehead gently. "I know you have questions about who I really am. When this is over, I will answer them. But right now, I need you to trust me." "I do trust you." "Good. Remember, do not open this door for anyone who does not say the code words." Marcus left, and Zarathul heard the door seal behind him. She was alone in their bedroom, listening to explosions and weapons fire echoing through the station's corridors. The communications panel in the room was still active. She could hear radio chatter from the attacking ships and the station's defenders. The extremist forces were inside Haven's Rest now, moving through the station in organized groups. They knew exactly where they were going. Section 7 clear, a voice reported. No resistance encountered. Diplomatic quarters secured, another voice said. Prisoners taken for questioning. Zarathul realized with growing horror that the attackers were not just raiding the station. They were taking prisoners. Important people who could be used as hostages or sources of information. People like her. She tried to track Marcus on the station's internal sensors, but his identification signal had vanished. According to the computer, he was not anywhere on Haven's Rest. Either the sensors were broken, or her husband knew how to become invisible to them. The radio chatter from the attackers began to change tone. Squad 3, report your status. Silence. Squad 3, please respond. More silence. All units, we have lost contact with Squad 3. Last known position was Level 7, Section C. Zarathul pulled up a station map on the room's computer. Level 7. Section C was the communications center. If Marcus had gone there first, it would explain why the attackers were having trouble coordinating their assault. Squad 5. Investigate Squad 3's last position. A few minutes later, Squad 5 here. We found Squad 3. They are unconscious. All of them. No sign of who did this. What do you mean unconscious? I mean they are alive but knocked out. Their weapons are gone. Someone hit them with something that put them to sleep instantly. More chatter followed, increasingly confused and worried. The attackers had expected to overwhelm the station quickly. Instead, their forces were disappearing one by one. Squads would report normal status, then go silent. When other teams investigated, they found unconscious soldiers and missing equipment. This is impossible, one of the extremist commanders said. Who is doing this? Station security has been neutralized. Another voice replied. We confirmed that. This is something else. Zarathul listened with growing amazement. Someone was single-handedly dismantling the invasion force. The attackers had brought dozens of trained soldiers, and they were being picked off by what seemed to be one person. The radio went quiet for a long time. When voices returned, they sounded frightened. Command, we need to abort this mission. Negative. Complete the objectives. Sir, we have lost contact with 8 squads. Whatever is on this station, it is hunting us. That is impossible. Scan for life signs. We are scanning. The sensors show normal station crew and our people. But someone is moving through areas our sensors say are empty. Someone who does not show up on any of our equipment. Zarathul smiled despite her fear. Her strange, gentle husband who cooked perfect dinners and grew impossible gardens was out there in the corridors, protecting everyone on the station. She still did not understand what he really was, but she was beginning to realize that the extremists had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked a station where Marcus Chen was visiting, and Marcus Chen, whatever else he might be, was clearly very good at war. Zarathul discovered she could access the station's security cameras from her sealed room. Marcus had given her administrative privileges she did not remember him setting up. She began switching between camera feeds, trying to find her husband in the chaos. What she saw instead was impossible. A squad of 6 Kethani warriors moved through the station's main corridor, their crystal armor glinting under the emergency lights. These were not ordinary soldiers. She recognized the markings of the Crystal Guard. Elite fighters bred for war. Each one worth 10 normal troops. They moved in perfect formation. Weapons ready. Scanning for threats. Behind them, something moved in the shadows near the ceiling. The security camera caught just a glimpse, a dark figure that seemed to flow like water through the ventilation grates above the warriors. The Kethani never looked up. Why would they? In 300 years of war, humans had never shown the ability to move like that. The figure dropped from the ceiling behind the last warrior. There was no sound, no flash of weapons fire. One moment the Crystal Guard had 6 members, the next they had 5. The missing warrior was simply gone. The remaining 5 continued forward, unaware that their teammate had vanished. They reached a junction where 2 corridors met. As they paused to decide which direction to go, the dark figure appeared again. Zarathul watched in stunned silence as Marcus, and she was certain now it was Marcus, moved between the warriors like a ghost. He did not fight them directly. Instead, he used their own size and strength against them. When one warrior turned toward a sound, Marcus redirected that movement into a collision with a teammate. When another raised his weapon, Marcus somehow caused the warrior to knock himself unconscious against a doorframe. Within 30 seconds, 5 of the most dangerous fighters her species had ever produced were lying unconscious in a neat pile. Marcus checked each one carefully, then disappeared back into the ventilation system. "Impossible," Zarathul whispered. "Humans cannot do this." She switched to another camera feed. A mixed group of human and Cathani extremists had cornered a group of civilian station workers in the mess hall. The extremists were armed with weapons from both civilizations, and they clearly intended to take the civilians as hostages. The lights went out in that section of the station. Emergency lighting flickered on, off, on again, in a pattern that seemed random, but somehow guided the civilians toward the exits, while leaving the extremists confused and stumbling in the darkness. When the lights stabilized, the civilians were gone, safely evacuated through passages the extremists had not known existed. The attackers found themselves alone in the mess hall, surrounded by tables and chairs that had been quietly rearranged into a maze. Marcus appeared in the center of the room. He was not trying to hide now. The extremists could see him clearly, standing calmly with his hands at his sides. He looked exactly like the gentle diplomat who cooked dinner every night, except for his eyes. Even through the security camera, Zarathul could see that his eyes held no warmth at all. "Surrender," Marcus said simply. "You are outmatched." The extremists laughed. There were 12 of them, armed with military weapons. He was one man with no visible equipment. They stopped laughing when Marcus moved. Zarathul had seen Cathani warriors fight. She had watched human soldiers in combat during the war. She thought she understood what fighting looked like. This was something entirely different. Marcus did not just fight faster than his opponents. He fought like he could see the future. Every move the extremists made, Marcus had already countered before they completed it. When they fired energy weapons, he was not where the beams struck. When they tried to surround him, he somehow ended up behind them instead. He used the rearranged furniture as weapons, turning tables into shields and chairs into projectiles with perfect accuracy. He redirected the extremists' own attacks back at them, causing them to hit each other instead of him. Most importantly, Marcus never seemed to be trying very hard. While his opponents grew increasingly desperate and sloppy, he remained calm and controlled. This was not a desperate fight for survival. This was a professional doing his job. When the fight ended, all 12 extremists were unconscious but breathing. Marcus had defeated them without killing anyone. He checked each fallen enemy, secured their weapons, and then spoke into a communication device Zarathul could not see. "Mess hall secure. 12 prisoners ready for pickup. Civilians evacuated safely." "Copy that, Reaper 7, came the reply. "Outstanding work. Reaper 7, not Commander Chen the diplomat. Reaper 7. Zarathul switched frantically between camera feeds, following her husband as he moved through the station. Every group of extremists he encountered was defeated with the same professional efficiency. He did not just beat them, he dismantled their entire operation. When attackers tried to access the station's computer systems, Marcus was already there, locking them out and turning their own hacking attempts against them. When they tried to damage critical life support equipment, he appeared to stop them before they could complete their sabotage. He was not just fighting individual battles, he was conducting an entire counter-invasion by himself. The radio chatter from the extremist ships grew increasingly panicked. "All boarding teams, abort mission, and return to ships immediately." "Sir, we cannot raise any of our teams on the station." "What do you mean you cannot raise them?" "I mean they are not responding. At all. Either they are all dead, or what? Or they have all been captured, by one person." There was a long silence on the radio. Then, "One person cannot capture 40 trained soldiers." Then, "Explain why our people keep disappearing." Another silence. "Begin bombardment of the station, If we cannot take it, we will destroy it. Zarathul felt ice in her stomach. The extremist ships were going to start shooting at Haven's Rest with heavy weapons. Even if Marcus could handle soldiers inside the station, he could not stop orbital bombardment. But apparently, he could. The security cameras outside the station showed Marcus in a maintenance airlock, putting on a spacesuit that looked far more advanced than standard station equipment. He attached some kind of device to the station's hull, then used a personal propulsion pack to launch himself toward the nearest enemy ship. "What is he doing?" Zarathul said aloud. She found her answer when that ship's weapons suddenly turned and fired on the vessel next to it instead of the station. Then that ship's weapons turned on a third ship. Within minutes, the entire extremist fleet was shooting at each other instead of Haven's Rest. Marcus had somehow infiltrated their computer systems and turned their own weapons against them. Ships that had come to destroy the station were now destroying each other, their crews unable to regain control of their own systems. By the time Marcus returned to the station, the extremist fleet was either destroyed or fleeing in confusion. Their invasion force was completely defeated, and not a single person on Haven's Rest had been seriously injured. Zarathul sat in her sealed room, staring at the security monitors in shock. Her husband, the man who grew flowers and cooked perfect meals, had single-handedly defeated an entire military operation. He had done it so efficiently that it looked easy. She heard footsteps in the corridor outside her door. A gentle knock followed. "Zarathul," Marcus called softly. "The flowers are singing. The code words." She unlocked the door and let him in. Marcus looked exactly the same as always. His clothes were clean, his hair was neat, and he wore the same gentle expression she knew. If she had not watched him fight through the security cameras, she would never have believed what he had just done. "Are you all right?" he asked, checking her over for injuries with the careful attention he usually gave his plants. "I am fine," Zarathul said. "But what you did out there? How is this possible?" Marcus sat down heavily in their reading chair. For the first time since she had known him, he looked tired. "I suppose," he said quietly, "it is time I told you who I really am." Marcus made tea for both of them while Zarathul waited for answers. His movements were the same as always, careful, precise, gentle, but now she understood that this gentleness was a choice, not a limitation. "My real name is Marcus Chen," he began, sitting across from her with his steaming cup. "That part is true. I am 42 years old, born on Earth, and I have been married to you for 6 months. Everything about our relationship is real. But you are not just a diplomatic officer. No." Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I am what humans call a reaper. We are soldiers trained for very specific kinds of warfare, the kind that happens when normal armies are not enough." Zarathul thought about what she had seen on the security cameras. How many reapers are there? Not many. Maybe 200 in the entire human military. We are expensive to train, and difficult to create. "What do you mean, difficult to create?" Marcus rolled up his sleeves, showing her his arms. What she had thought were normal scars were actually tiny surgical marks, hundreds of them covering his skin. Human military science learned how to improve our soldiers in ways that do not show on the outside. Faster reflexes, better balance, enhanced awareness, improved healing. We can see better in the dark, hear sounds others miss, and process information more quickly than normal humans. "You are augmented, like cybernetics?" "No cybernetics. Everything we can do, baseline humans can do. We are just more efficient at it. Human bodies are already capable of incredible things when properly trained and conditioned. Reapers simply have access to more of that potential." Zarathul remembered how Marcus never lost his balance during gravity fluctuations, how he caught falling objects before they hit the ground, how he seemed to know things before they happened. How long have humans had this technology? About 50 years. But we learned the techniques from studying human history. There have always been individuals who could do extraordinary things, fighters who could defeat much larger forces, hunters who could track anything, healers who could save people everyone else thought were dying. We just figured out how to create those abilities deliberately. "Why did you not use Reapers more during the war?" Marcus smiled sadly. We did use them. You just never saw the missions they completed. When Cathani supply convoys disappeared, when your communication networks went down at critical moments, when your battle plans somehow reached human forces before the battles began, that was Reaper work. Zarathul felt a chill. How many of you were operating in Cathani territory? Enough, but never enough to win the war quickly. That was the point. I do not understand. Marcus set down his tea and looked directly at her. Zarathul, humans could have won the war against your people any time in the last 100 years. We chose not to. The words hit her like a physical blow. That is impossible. Think about what you saw today. I defeated 40 trained soldiers and disabled 12 warships by myself. And I am just one Reaper. If humanity had wanted to end the war, we could have sent 50 Reapers to your homeworld and captured your entire government in a single night. Then why did you not? Why did you let the fighting continue for so long? Because, Marcus said gently, we did not want to be conquerors. We wanted to be neighbors. He stood up and walked to their garden, touching one of the hybrid plants that grew there. Look at this flower. It is part earth rose, part Cathani crystal bloom. According to all the biology textbooks, it cannot exist. But here it is, beautiful and alive. What does that have to do with the war? Everything, Marcus said. Humans learned a long time ago that the best solutions come from cooperation, not domination. We could have conquered your empire, but then we would have had to rule it forever. We could have wiped out your people, but then we would have lost everything unique about Cathani culture. Instead, we fought a limited war until you were ready to consider peace. Zarathul struggled to process this. You are saying humans deliberately held back? We fought hard enough to prove we could not be easily defeated, but not so hard that your people would be destroyed or humiliated. We wanted a peace treaty where both sides felt they were equals. But the casualties, all those people who died. Marcus's expression grew heavy with grief. Yes, people died. That is the terrible mathematics of war and peace. More people would have died if the war had continued for another century. Many more would have died if we had invaded your worlds directly. This was the path that led to the fewest deaths overall. But that does not make it painless. The communication panel in their quarters chimed. Marcus activated it, revealing a room full of human and Cathani officials. Commander Chen, said a human admiral, excellent work today. The extremist threat has been eliminated. Thank you, sir. What about the prisoners? They are being questioned. More importantly, recordings of today's action have been distributed to intelligence agencies across the galaxy. The political impact has been significant. Significant. A Cathani general appeared on the screen. Princess, are you unharmed? I am fine, Zarathul said. But I think we need to have a very different conversation about this peace treaty. Agreed, the general said. After seeing what human soldiers can actually do, our military advisors are recommending some major changes to our strategic planning. Over the next several hours, Zarathul listened as military leaders from both sides discussed the implications of what had happened at Haven's Rest. The recording of Marcus's single-handed defense of the station was being analyzed by every major power in the galaxy. The tactical efficiency is unprecedented, a Cathani analyst reported. A single human operator neutralized a combined fleet using minimal resources and no lethal force. This suggests capabilities far beyond what we estimated during the war. How many more soldiers like Commander Chen do the humans have? Asked a nervous-looking alien diplomat. Enough, replied the human admiral simply. When the conference call ended, Zarathul found herself alone with Marcus again. The man she had married to end a war, who had seemed so ordinary and gentle, was apparently one of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. Are you afraid of me now? Marcus asked quietly. Zarathul considered the question seriously. She thought about everything she had observed over the past 6 months. Marcus cooking perfect meals, tending impossible gardens, learning her language and customs, treating her with kindness when he had no political reason to do so. No, she said finally. I am not afraid of you. I am afraid of what would happen to anyone foolish enough to threaten people you care about. Marcus smiled, the same warm expression she had grown to love. That is probably wise. So what happens now? The galaxy knows what humans are capable of. Will that change everything? Probably, Marcus said. But I think it will change things for the better. Peace is much easier when everyone understands the actual stakes. And us? What happens to our marriage now that the political situation has changed? Marcus took her hands in his. That depends on what you want. The marriage contract specified that it would last until the peace treaty was finalized. Now that both sides understand each other better, the treaty will probably be signed within weeks. You could return to your homeworld as a hero. Or you could stay married to a human who grows impossible flowers and cooks dinner every night. A human who would do anything to protect you, but who would rather spend his time learning poetry from your culture. Zarathul looked around their quarters. At the garden where plants from two different worlds somehow lived in harmony. At the artwork that blended human and Kethany styles into something entirely new. At the life they had built together in 6 months of learning to trust each other. I think, she said slowly, I would like to see what other impossible things we can grow together. I would like to see what I will. Marcus kissed her gently. I was hoping you would say that. Outside their window, ships from a dozen different civilizations docked at Haven's Rest, bringing diplomats and scientists eager to study this new understanding of human capabilities. The galaxy was adjusting to a new reality where humanity was recognized not as a weak species that had gotten lucky in war, but as patient predators who had chosen cooperation over conquest. Inside their quarters, a princess and a soldier tended their garden and planned a future that neither of their peoples could have imagined. The war was over. Not because one side had defeated the other, but because both sides had finally learned to see each other clearly. And in a small pot near the window, an impossible flower bloomed with petals of crystal and earth rose, beautiful and thriving in soil that should not have been able to support its existence.